Welcome to the Anime Audiophile Podcast. Please like and subscribe for more. Thank you. Shikamaru Hiden, a cloud drifting in the silent dark. Konoha Chapter 1. When exactly did I stop saying what a drag? Shikamaru considered the question as he looked up at the sky, where one thin cloud after another briskly sailed by, despite the wind not being especially strong. The hurried confusion above him was not so different from the twisting and turning in his own heart, and Shikamaru smiled wryly. At any rate, he was busy. More than 2 years had passed since the Fourth Great Ninja War, and the world was finally starting to settle down again. The Five Kage Alliance, born of the outbreak of war, remained intact, leading to a dramatically different world for shinobi. The original alliance had been established among the 5 hidden villages, but after the Great War, the smaller neighboring lands were quick to announce their intention to join the larger group. Shinobi from every part of the continent were now a part of the organization, which had slowly developed from a loose alliance into a more formal union. The work previously undertaken by individual villages before the launch of the Five Kage Alliance now came in batches to the union. Ninja representatives from every region in the Union then discussed and assigned missions to the villages. Being able to ensure a steady flow of work corrected disparities among them, finally bringing an era of peace and stability to the world of the shinobi. Ah! The sigh melted into the air. The stone beneath him was cold, meaning that his back was essentially frozen. If I don't move, I'm gonna catch a cold or something, he thought, and yet he had a reason for not getting up. Work was waiting. An absolutely ridiculous amount of work. And he couldn't figure out where to even start with it. If he simply thought of this time as a brief break, he could keep lying here like this in the middle of the day. But once he got up, that dream would die. His brain would immediately shift into work mode. And once that happened, he knew he wouldn't be able to lie down again. So he continued to lounge obstinately on the cold stone roof of the Hokage residence. And as long as no one came around looking for him, he intended to stay like that. Beyond the round roof, he could see the stony mountain, the faces of the generations of Hokage carved into it. In order from the right were the first Hokage, Hashirama, and his younger brother, Tobirama. They were followed by the third Hokage, Hiruzen, who died in Orochimaru's operation to destroy Konoha, and Namikaze Minato, the Yellow Flash. The fifth Hokage, Tsunade, was one of the 3 legendary shinobi alongside Orochimaru and Jiraiya. These were the historical Hokage. The face of the current Hokage was next to Tsunade's. Sleepy eyes under wiry hair. The lower half of his symmetrical face with its sharp nose covered by a mask. The Hokage was the symbol of Konoha, someone every ninja in Konoha had to approve before ascension. The face in the mountain was meant to carve the Hokage's face into memory, and yet the lower half of this man's was hidden by a mask. Itachi Kakashi, Hokage. Every single soul in the shinobi world knew him as the master of the 2 heroes who brought about the end of the Fourth Great Ninja War. Shikamaru, however, had a much closer relationship with Kakashi and those 2 heroes, and he felt disconnected from all the fuss made over them. People told him they were heroes and legends and praised them to high heaven, but he definitely wouldn't use words like that to describe any of them. Kakashi was a man who stepped up to the plate when he had to, but in everyday life he was a total waste of a grown-up with no interest in doing anything. And the 2 so-called heroes were the same. One was a complete and total idiot. And the other was utterly pig-headed. There was no helping either of them, and yet they were called living legends. Shikamaru honestly did not understand this world. What am I even doing? His thoughts naturally spilled out from his mouth. Shikamaru was very much not the hero type. To start with, he had never wanted to be a hero. He wasn't interested in polishing his ninjutsu and being one of those super industrious types either. He also didn't particularly want to study medical ninjutsu and become a rearguard support specialist, and training in computation or rhetoric to become an official seemed like a giant yawn. Just right at everything, that was Shikamaru's dream. As a ninja of just the right rank, he would carry out just the right missions, marry just the right girl, and live with their just right children. and then an old age that was just right. Somehow, each day would end without anything in particular happening. Was there anything happier than that? He didn't think so. On nice days, he could lie around like this and send his thoughts chasing after the flowing clouds as he stared up at the sky. On rainy days, he'd pour a drink for his shogi opponent. No one expecting anything from him, not the tiniest bit of pressure. Stress would never darken his heart. What a wonderful life that would be. Ah, the heavy, weighty sigh sounded as though it were seeping out from the depths of his stomach. This thing reality was a truly formidable enemy. Against a human enemy, Shikamaru would have a real chance of winning. Even a godlike enemy, as long as they had a physical form, would have to have a weak spot somewhere. In fact, his opponents in the last Great War had all had at least a bit of monster in them, but Shikamaru and his comrades had rallied their forces and defeated each and every one of them. He could beat a real enemy. But there was no way he could defeat an enemy with no physical form, i.e., reality. And whether he liked it or not, reality was callously carrying him off in a different direction. Despite Shikamaru simply wanting a just right life, he had somehow become an essential part of the allied shinobi. He worked to divide up the work requests brought in by the daimyo and citizens of each land into ranks of 3D, and assigned those missions, taking into account the special characteristics of each village before determining which was best suited to the task. He discussed and negotiated any number of issues with the 5 great nations. He even played shogi with the aging Tsuchikage. He could manage any task. Some even said the allied shinobi worked because of Konoha's Shikamaru. The more he resisted, the more he tried not to stand out, the more disinterested he was in advancing through the ranks, the more he was pushed up by those around him. His first mistake had been the Chunin selection exams, where genin from the entire continent, from the 5 great nations down to adjacent smaller nations, came together. For some reason, while the shinobi world was rocked by disaster and strife, Konoha rogue ninja, Orochimaru's secret maneuvering, the death of the 3rd Hokage, Shikamaru was the only one allowed the promotion to Chunin. He was the lone graduate. And it wasn't as though he had particularly worked for it. During the one-on-one fight part of the exam, he had initially been thrown completely by a cheeky female ninja when she used a ridiculously large fan to create storm-level winds, but in the end the fight had come to a stalemate, and he had surrendered. That had been well received. Once a ninja became a chunin, they had people under them. The quality deemed most valuable for this purpose was an ability to accurately assess any given situation. The examiners handed down top marks for Shikamaru's sportsmanlike admission of defeat. This was a mixed blessing. He hadn't even wanted to take the exam, he'd been forced into it by his master Sarutobi Asuma. He hadn't had any intention of getting good marks or any real interest in doing it at all. But reality led Shikamaru to the rank of Chunin, and the way the villagers looked at him changed. It was around this time that his life plan started slipping off the rails. When Sasuke left the village, Shikamaru had chased after him as the leader of a team of ninja in his class. After that, he was seen as standing a head higher than others in his year and given responsibility for a number of missions. The more he resisted, the more reality pulled Shikamaru higher and higher. 2 years after the 4th Great Ninja War, Shikamaru turned 19, an age at which he could no longer be called a child. How fortunate he was to have people counting on him. How wonderful it was to be needed by people. No one had to tell him, he knew it. Shikamaru's friends had actually risen all the way to the top to become heroes of the village, of all ninja, simply out of the desire to be needed by people. He knew without anyone having to tell him that people were creatures who needed others. Which was why he didn't feel weird when someone said to him, "If you weren't here." If he was needed, he'd face whatever problem needed facing unflinchingly. With everything he hadn't once cut corners on a mission. 19 years since he'd been born into this world. Already, his entire self was ensnared by too many ties and obligations. Akatsuki, the organization plotting to rule the world, had killed his teacher Asuma. And Asuma had had a girlfriend named Kurinai, and Asuma's baby had lived in her belly. That baby was already 2 years old. Her name was Mirai. Become Mirai's teacher. It was a promise he had to keep. Shikamaru's father, Shikaku, had worked as an officer of the allied shinobi during the Fourth Great Ninja War. He died with Ino's father, Inoichi, when Obito's maneuvering ended in Ten Tails' Biju bomb blowing up the Alliance headquarters. The last words of his father and Inoichi were still clear in his ears even now. Never forget that we live on inside you. Forever. Become a great man like your father. He had sworn it to the man who gave him life in this world. And Naruto. The shinobi hero, always forthright, never doubting for a second he would someday be Hokage. I'm the only one who can be his advisor, Shikamaru had thought on death's doorstep, as Sakura treated his injuries in the battle with 10 Tails. Make Naruto the Hokage and be his right hand. That was the dream. He was bound by so many ties and obligations, he couldn't even count them all. He had no doubt these were the power propelling him forward. Shikamaru could live as Shikamaru precisely because everyone had him in their hearts. And yet, it was exhausting sometimes. The real him wasn't the man everyone thought he was. He was the sort you could find anywhere, who felt like every little thing was a drag, who dreamed of having a just right life. The more people expected of him, the more he wanted to run away. That was the true nature of this man, Shikamaru. Way back when, his friends had understood his tendency to find everything to be a hassle, his lack of motivation. When had everyone started getting the wrong idea? When had Shikamaru stopped saying what a drag? He felt like both had happened around the same time. That's, as he stared up at the clouds, a deep crease carved itself out between his eyebrows. His almond-shaped eyes focused on a single point in space, where he could just make out a lone falcon. The majestic bird, wings spread, turned slowly to the west in the creeping crimson of the early evening sky, Shikamaru in the middle of its arcing trajectory. Or rather, more accurately, the circle of its flight had the Hokage residence as its center. This wasn't a matter to simply sit up for. He stood. His mind, drifting along on a boundless ocean only seconds before, had already snapped back to reality, a whetted blade. His eyes caught hold of the falcon and didn't let go. Jet black. The falcon was a pure black, as though it had been drawn in ink. No, it really had been drawn in ink. The art of cartoon beast mimicry, Sai's jutsu. Sai had taken Sasuke's place on Team 7, the team Naruto and Sakura belonged to. With his special technique, the art of cartoon beast mimicry, he could give life to the beasts and birds he drew and make them move. The falcon flying above Shikamaru's head was drawn by Sai. Finally here, he muttered to himself as the falcon stopped circling in the sky and started to descend. Shikamaru started running. His feet headed for the stairs to the lower level, at the bottom of which was the Hokage's office, the falcon's destination. He grabbed onto the staircase railing, and the bird disappeared into the side of the building, brushing up against his cheek as it did. He very nearly flew down the stairs and raced along the hallway. The office. He opened the door without knocking. "Oh, Shikamaru," Kakashi said. He was standing in front of a desk piled with a mess of documents and books, holding out a scroll. Sai's falcon just came into this room. Kakashi flipped around the scroll he had been reading so Shikamaru could see it. Text dancing on a white background leapt into Shikamaru's field of view. He rushed over to get a closer look. "It seems the situation is even more serious than I thought," Kakashi said, looking at Shikamaru. His eyes were so fierce he was almost glaring, and his usual absent-minded tone was also abnormally serious, all of which gave Shikamaru a bad feeling. His eyes chased after the characters written on the scroll. "I don't know myself anymore." This last sentence alone, spelled out in a fine brush, looked to Shikamaru especially vivid. Konoha Chapter 2. Dear 6th Hokage, I don't have much time, so I will be brief. With regard to the matter of concern, I have concluded my investigation to a certain extent. However, not one of my 10 companions has returned, and I am now alone. It is not certain whether they are dead or alive. But there seems to be no doubt that they were detected by the enemy. Allow me to get right to the point. The state of affairs in the Land of Silence is several times more serious than you suspected, Hokage. If the land is left to continue as is, the allied shinobi will be faced with a predicament at some point. In fact, I believe this situation could potentially change the framework of the world itself. There is a man at work in this land. His name is Jingo. Jingo is the Land of Silence, and the Land of Silence is Jingo. It would be no exaggeration to say that everything in the Land of Silence is for Jingo. Fascinating. That is the most appropriate word to describe him. Jingo may very well change the world. Perhaps that's something I want. The ninja is a creature with so little in the way of salvation, don't you think? We endure, thus we are ninja. Is that really enough? Lord Hokage. Kakashi. I don't know myself anymore. Lifting his face from the letter, Shikamaru let out a short sigh. Before him, Kakashi sat with his elbows up on the desk. He wasn't wearing the conical hat he always wore when he went out as Hokage or was on official Hokage business, and his hair brushed against his forehead, having grown somewhat over the last 2 years. His face from the nose down was, as always, covered by a mask. Resting his chin on clasped hands, Kakashi stared silently at Shikamaru. "What do you think?" he asked, coolly. The Hokage's office. They were the only ones there. Why did Sai send a cartoon beast and not return himself? Good question. Kakashi lifted his chin from his hands and threw himself back in his chair. Sticking his chin out and staring at the ceiling above him, he sighed even more heavily than Shikamaru had. From that letter, it seems like everyone other than Sai has already fallen into enemy hands or been killed. Looks like Sai was leading a team of 10 masters, the cream of the crop, even amongst members of the Umbu. I can't believe they would be so careless as to expose themselves to the enemy. This enemy must be fairly adept too. As he spoke, Kakashi twirled around in his chair. He disappeared from view behind the backrest, then reappeared as he spun all the way around again. No matter how dire the situation, Kakashi never tensed up. Normally, the more urgent something was, the more a person froze up, both mentally and physically. But Kakashi tried to keep his thinking loose by deliberately doing something frivolous, like whirling around in his chair. A competent ninja, he had likely come by this behavior naturally through surviving long years of battle and bloodshed. Shikamaru opened his mouth, a tense look on his face, as Kakashi stared absent-mindedly at the ceiling. So break them out, I guess. Yeah, came Kakashi's immediate, brief reply, face still turned away from Shikamaru and up at the ceiling. If he's sending this kind of letter, Shikamaru continued, then he should have returned to the village himself and reported to you, Lord Hokage. How many times have I told you to call me Kakashi? Kakashi finally looked at Shikamaru. When did you get so stiff? You used to be more relaxed, it was nice. I can't be a child forever. Naruto's still a child even now. That guy is who he is. Oh, is that it? Kakashi got a sad look in his eyes before dropping them down to the letter from Sai spread out on the desk. Sai's cartoon beast mimicry transformed a written message into an animal, dispatched it to its destination, and turned the beast back into the original text when it arrived at a blank scroll. The jet-black falcon Shikamaru had seen on the roof was the message Kakashi was reading now. The state of affairs in the Land of Silence is several times worse than I thought, huh? So I suppose we should assume that the majority of the ninja who disappeared in the Great War and any recent rogue ninja are in the Land of Silence, then? If Sai is making declarations like this, I suppose so. The Land of Silence, everything went back to the events of 2 years earlier. Many had been sacrificed in the Fourth Great Ninja War brought about by Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito. The shinobi of the 5 great nations, faced with supernatural powers beyond the realm of the human, joined together to stand against them. In the end, they managed to defeat Otsutsuki Kagaya, the one controlling Madara from the shadows, and end the war. A time of peace came, and the nations started dealing with the aftermath of the intense struggle, which was when identifying the dead and the missing became a more pressing matter. The battle had been fierce enough to alter the terrain of the continent, so those who left behind corpses were lucky. Given this, many more were identified as missing than dead in the villages, somewhere around 10,000 people in the 5 great nations, sacrifices of the Great War, a war that threatened to destroy not only the ninja villages, but the world itself. Some said they were lucky to have made it through with only thousands lost. But Shikamaru didn't think so. Even one death was a death. Even one unavoidable sacrifice was too many. In the Great War, he had lost a friend, Hyuga Neji. To Shikamaru, Neji was not a number, not 1 in 10,000. His friend's death itself was everything. And the same could be said for any one of the people lost in the war. He felt the death of a single person could never be explained away in a simple word like sacrifice. Which was exactly why they could not allow a war to break out. So just how many of the missing drifted into the land of silence exactly? Kakashi muttered, interrupting Shikamaru's thoughts. Just as Kakashi noted, Shikamaru was aware that of the ninja who had gone missing at the end of the Great War, more than a few had survived and gone into hiding. He had first realized this at the Allied Shinobi headquarters. All work requests came through the Alliance headquarters, allowing him to see before anyone else the number and types of requests coming in. In an unusual turn a year earlier, the number of ninja requests had dropped so much that the change was practically visible. With the 5 great ninja nations having chosen a path of cooperation, the number of battles in the surface world ruled by the daimyos had also decreased remarkably in recent times. Requests for A and B rank work, the dangerous missions, were also on the decline. But the situation was not as simple as that. The number of comparatively easy C and D rank requests had shrunk as well. Shikamaru had heard about this problem promptly, given that he had a seat at headquarters. But just because the number of requests was declining didn't necessarily mean there was something specific they could do about it. As an alliance, they had reached the conclusion that they would watch how things progress for the time being. But a man had appeared to link the issue of the declining requests with another problem from after the Great War, Kakashi, sitting at the desk in front of him. The problem Kakashi had his eye on, the ninja who had started going rogue in the 5 great shinobi nations about a year earlier. Once a month, a new ninja would desert from each village, making 12 ninja per village up to that point. Combining the 5 villages, a total of 60 shinobi had disappeared, all of them young, single men. Desertion was a serious crime. Naturally, the villages had sent out pursuers. But they had not been able to catch even one of the missing ninja. Maybe it wasn't a good idea to send backup and have Sai investigating this the whole time. I should have pulled him in and let him catch his breath before heading back to the land of silence. It's too late to second-guess yourself now. You're right. After leaving the village to investigate the matter of the rogue ninja, Sai had found a small clue and reported back just over a month ago. Kakashi had the idea that the rogue ninja and the sharp drop in work requests might be closely related, and so he told Sai to continue his investigation and dispatched additional members of the Umbu to back him up. The clue Sai had arrived at, the land of silence. The continent was made up of the 5 great nations, home to the 5 great hidden shinobi villages, with medium-sized and minor countries wedged between these, all vying for power. To the far west was the land of silence. With no shinobi village and absolutely no contact with any other nation, it was called the land of silence for its quiet ways and refusal to share its stories. Like the other lands, it was populated with citizens ruled by a daimyo, but absolutely no other details slipped out of this closed country. And Sai said that somehow, Konoha's rogue ninja had escaped there. That was not the only bit of information fueling concern. Some of the Konoha ninja who had gone missing in the Great War were there too. Rogue and missing ninja were gathering in the land of silence. But to what end? Kakashi saw that this was the reason for the sudden drop in requests to the Alliance. What do you think's happened to Sai? He's alive. I think so too. Beneath the mask, Kakashi's mouth pulled itself into a smile. This fixation on the man Jingo, the letters practically oozing with it, it reads something like admiration. He touched the letter, written in size-flowing brush strokes. Shikamaru picked up on his words, as though reading his mind. I don't want to believe it, but Sai might have been taken in by this Jingo. He's pure-hearted, that guy. If he's alive, we have to save him. We do. Kakashi's scarred left eye was colored with a dark shadow, and Shikamaru was acutely aware of what this capable Hokage was not saying. There was something more important than saving their comrade. Shikamaru brought it out into the open himself. If the situation in the Land of Silence is like Sai says, and they are active in the way that you suspect, Lord Hokage, then we have to strike as soon as possible. I know. Shikamaru didn't stop. It's been 2 years since the Great War. The villages have finally gotten their feet back under them, but currently no nation has even half the power they once had. We can't go to war. Exactly. Letting out another heavy sigh, Kakashi stood up. He walked around the desk strewn with scrolls and documents to stand next to Shikamaru. Looks like you have the same idea I do. Yes. In that case, you probably know what I'm thinking? You want to go. Yourself. In his youth, Kakashi had made some noise as a member of the Embu, a capable warrior even in this special unit, the sole purpose of which was to take on dark, clandestine missions. Shikamaru saw a darkness whispering deep in Kakashi's eyes, twisted into a bow shape by his smile. You're the Lord Hokage, Shikamaru spit out, staring straight into this darkness. You more than understand your own position. You must already be aware that your wish cannot be granted. Your head works as fast as Master Minato's ninjutsu. Shikamaru stared, not responding. Anyway, if it's like Sai said, then the key to the Land of Silence is this man Jingo. Kakashi tossed his words at the silent Shikamaru. Yes. If we can do something about him, then we'll no longer have a problem, right? I think so too. So then, Kakashi placed his hands on his hips like an old man and stretched deeply. Who do you think I should send? I'll go. What? Kakashi's eyes grew round. Don't you have a pretty big role to play already? You're shouldering a part of the alliance as Konoha's representative. You don't need to go doing assassination work anymore. Assassination. Kakashi had said it. By putting into words the thought they shared, he had made it real. If it came to a fight between the allied shinobi and the Land of Silence, the alliance might be thrown into confusion once more after it had finally at great cost pulled itself together into its current stable form. And with each nation utterly and thoroughly exhausted, there wasn't a soul anywhere looking for a new fight. If they believed Sai's letter, assassinating Jingo would be the most effective method of silencing the Land of Silence. The fewer people who know about this, the better. That doesn't mean you need to go. My friends have been captured. Please let me do this. Kakashi held his tongue, as if his objections had been squashed by Shikamaru's insistence. Shikamaru thought about it. Kakashi was right, he didn't have to go. A critical part of the work of someone higher up the chain was selecting the right person for the job and entrusting them with the necessary tasks. Even still, Shikamaru had volunteered. He didn't know why, really. He just could not for the life of him stand by and do nothing. End of chapters 1 and 2. Thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe for lots more.